Hello everybody.
Hey.
Welcome to episode 4. Rollo's joining us today again. He loves the camera.
He does. He's literally been asleep on the floor, and then as soon as we went live, yes, you've come to say hello.
Because the attention wasn't on you anymore.
That's right. Yes.
So we're debriefing the third what's the word I'm looking for? Series, episode, no, session.
Workshop.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, how have you been? You have been.
Sorry, the dog's. Yeah, there we go.
It's very distracting.
Wow, it's been an interesting week, Wendy. So I've been wearing the blood glucose monitor.
Yeah.
What's been really interesting, and I had started, reducing sugar prior to this, but my blood glucose has been very stable. Mm-hmm. Except I haven't been. I'm just gonna keep moving this. Sorry, keeps moving. It's one of those wobbly ones, isn't it? I haven't been 100% this week because I wanted firstly to ease in a little bit, but also I still had some stuff in the house, and let's face it, I wasn't going to waste it.
No, of course.
But I've been like 90% good.
Uh-huh.
And my blood glucose has been really stable, except if I've had a little cheat, it's not that I've had a big spike in my sugar, it's that I've had a big crash afterwards, and that's been interesting. And physically feeling that crash and watching it happen on the graph.
So what physical feelings did you experience?
So headaches again, or feeling lethargic, or a bit of brain fog, things like that. And you described it quite nicely earlier as that kind
Carb coma.
Carb coma, the 3 p.m. kind of slump that you get. Well, I used to have that when I worked in offices. I'd stuff my face at lunch, have some kind of delicious dessert, and then just go, ugh. And we would call it the graveyard shift.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, 3 o'clock feeling awful. Yeah, and it's definitely
Post-lunch.
Yeah.
And I used to work in learning and development, so do a lot of group sessions and training. And it was the one, it's always the after lunch session that people would fall asleep.
Yeah.
They're desperately, you can see them, they're going, trying to keep their eyes open and their heads are going, and then you always get a snoozer. And
apparently teachers hate the class after lunch because they start off all really, really hectic, and then by the end of it, but then by the end of it, they're like all slumpy.
You're not getting anything out of them, are you?
No.
Yet, on the lunch menus at school, it's all carbs and sugar.
I wonder why.
I know. Don't get me started on the lunch menus at school.
No.
Jamie What's-His-Face did not do much to help that situation when it was supposedly all about...
I think he was blocked, though.
Yeah.
I think he really was blocked.
Maybe that's it. He was blocked.
Yeah.
Because I was hoping that these weren't the meals he'd introduced, because...
No, I think there's a lot of profit, isn't there? I think it's not health-led. I think it is profit-led.
Yeah, well, we kind of had that conversation this evening, didn't we?
Yeah,
but that
we
does go
did.
off on a tangent a little, although it's true.
We were going to talk about your blood pressure.
Yes, so I had a whole bunch of blood results at the GP, blood tests at the GP, and then I've got those results printed off fresh from the GP today, and have brought them to Wendy. Ta-da! That's it, giving away my dress there. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Don't look.
So, from an NHS perspective, these blood results are fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really major that stands out other than... So your HbA1c, which is essentially the measurement of the life of your red blood cells. Mm-hmm. So that's what we look at to measure pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. And then essentially if the number is considered normal if it's between 20 and 41. If you're 42, then you're diabetic. Okay, you'd be considered pre-diabetic at 40. Okay,
so I'm 34.
You're 34, which is within the normal range, but I would like to see you nearer 20, in the 20s, definitely not the 30s. So I think that's an interesting one. And the other one that I picked up was your B12. So your serum B12 is actually quite low. even by their standards.
Oh, yeah. So I used to do B12 injections, not through the NHS. I used to buy them privately and do them. Really effing painful.
You said, so we can definitely recommend a sublingual or like a spray that you spray on the soft palate that will be absorbed through the bloodstream rather than into the gut, and then, because they're not very effective.
No, that's what I understand. If you supplement, it's not really that effective.
Well, unless you're vegan, you're going to be getting B12 in your diet. Through meat, fish, any animal product.
Yeah.
So if you're not getting it and you eat those foods, it's a sign that your absorption is the issue. So therefore, taking a supplement that goes through your stomach...
Not going to absorb it.
No.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so a sublingual, you can put a tablet under your tongue, or the spray would be... But other than that, I mean, you're pretty... I mean, I've got a book. I've got the book of blood results that I can do a deep dive, because I don't actually keep in my head all of... I mean, there's a lot of tests that you've had.
Well, you can keep that if you want.
Oh, well, I will. And then I'll do a deep dive.
We'll talk about that one next week.
Yeah.
You did say something last week about blood pressure, and now they go by a certain range, but it used to be that when you trained it would be a certain number plus your age.
Plus your age, yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, and they've reduced it down recently as well. So it used to be 140 over 80 millimeters mercury, and now I believe it's 120 over...
120 over 80.
Yeah.
So what, because you looked at my blood pressure, because I've been keeping a record for about 3 or 4
so
weeks.
I've got it here, you sent it to me.
Yeah.
And what's really good about these results is you can see that they are coming down. I mean, obviously there is a change, morning, evening, afternoon and evening, but overall the lower figure, which is the one that we're most concerned about, because that's the figure when the heart is relaxed or not contracted, and that definitely has come down.
Yeah, and it's more stabilised, I think.
Yeah.
So what bit do you add the age to, the first number?
Yeah.
Okay. So did you say it was 100 plus your age?
Do you know what? I can't actually remember.
Okay.
I can't remember.
You're right there.
But he wants to come back.
Okay, so that's all really interesting. So yes, it would be, if you want to, you don't have to, but if you want to deep dive and have a look in your book, and then let's see, and maybe we can discuss that next week if there's any other anomalies.
Yeah.
And did you say that you've got the spray here?
I don't, but I have it at the Southsea Apothecary.
Oh, do you? So if you could bring that next time, and then I could start using that, that would be awesome, and I'll buy that off you.
You're not a fan of the dog, because my dog's a slobby dog.
It's just a slobber, it's
I
not
know.
the dog.
I know.
It's just a slobber.
We say love the dog, love the slob.
I know.
He's not. He's
Well, I
not
don't love the
happy,
slob.
No.
Probably because my dog doesn't slobber, that's why. I've just got one of those dogs that
You
doesn't
can't
slobber.
help it, can you?
No. Anyway, so yeah, so that's me. But what did we learn today?
Just one question. Have you craved?
Not really.
Have you been hungry?
Yes. Been eating a lot of pistachios. Yes, I've still been hungry. I have.
Oh, and your string. Did you measure your string?
I've got my string, yes. I don't know if I'm going to have lost any weight in the first week though. It was Alex's birthday as well, so we did have
It's all coming out now.
gluten-free cake. Okay, so I got this. I measured it, didn't I?
Yeah, you did.
I sent you a message. I was like, oh dear. This is 80. No, sorry. Oh, God, that would be too much. No, 38.5 inches. Inches, right? So I used to be a 28-inch waist, and now I'm a 38.5-inch waist.
Okay.
That was disappointing to learn. Not unsurprising though. But yes, okay. So I'll measure again. But I doubt anything's going to change, but who knows? We will see. We can do this every week, and we're going to see.
And then what we plan to do is cut the little pieces of string off.
And see how much we got.
And then we can see how much that you've lost.
Hold the line.
Oh, you got it? Around your belly button?
It's the same.
It's Maybe half an inch. Maybe half.
Oh, you're just being generous. It's the same.
Okay.
But I haven't been full on it this week, as we know. But that, what was I going to say? I don't know, that just escaped from my brain. Can't have been important.
Oh, what we were learning this week.
Oh, yes. So what were we learning this week? So actually, everyone was really silent this week. I don't know if that was shock or if that was absorption of information, but we very much looked at the more technical aspects, the more scientific side of things. And I mean, a lot of it made a lot of sense to me. Some things I'm going to have to reflect on because, there was a lot of scientific lingo.
It is quite a lot of science. So we were really focusing on insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and why insulin is not good for us. I mean, it's essential. We need it, but not in high amounts.
So when we talk about high amounts, that was really interesting to me because there was this, a chart from 1920 till now. And in 1920, we were having, how many grams of sugar? It was really low, wasn't it?
Really low. Like under...
5 grams or something.
I think it was maybe 20. It was a lot.
It was low.
Low, yes.
But what we've learned that by now we have 8 times more sugar on average than we did back in 1920.
Yeah.
Right? And then, if you look at literal direct correlations, if you look at the average size of a person in 1920 and now, of course, it's vastly different. But what was really interesting is you were talking about we were talking about waist circumference, weren't you? Given the string we've just tried. And that actually there are different measures for different countries.
Yes. That's
interesting to me. So the UK was for a male, 94 centimetres?
Yeah, and in America it's higher.
It was 100.
Yeah, so European countries are about 4 to 6 centimetres less than America.
But that was an indicator for whether you potentially have metabolic syndrome, correct?
Yeah, so your waist circumference, if your waist circumference is over a certain amount, then that can be indicative of metabolic syndrome.
I find that interesting though, because some people are just built wide.
It's more that sort of belly fat, it's that sort of typical male
beer belly.
Yeah.
Middle-aged.
Yeah.
What's it called? Middle-aged spread?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm totally rocking that.
Yeah.
Dad bod.
Yeah, I mean, you see it, don't you? When men look pregnant, don't they? They literally do, because they hold all their fat in the stomach area, whereas women tend to hold their fat all over, bottom, thighs and stomach. But yeah, an increased stomach circumference with other indicators.
Yes, because there was about 5 or 6 on there, wasn't there? And it was if you had 3 or more of them.
That's right.
Yeah.
So high triglycerides, low HDL, high density lipoprotein. It's part of your cholesterol family. High blood pressure.
Can't remember the others.
I can't remember the others.
Anyway, it was like 6 points. And so if you had 3 of those things, you were considered to be having metabolic syndrome, correct? And so the thing that that you were saying is that this is where the 5 grams of sugar came in. The body can't handle more than 5 grams of sugar per serving. But the average serving, just of one slice of toast, before you've put any jam or anything on it, or Nutella, is already 15 grams of sugar.
Yeah.
And if you're having 2 slices of toast in the morning, assuming they're plain, you're having 30 grams of sugar in one dose. Yeah. Not to mention if you then have a tea or coffee with sugar or whatever else. So the average person is having far exceeding the recommended amount of 5 grams of sugar that the body can handle per serving. Yeah.
Basically, if you ingest more than 5 grams, then the body releases insulin to bring that sugar down out from the bloodstream, and it will push that sugar into cells. and then it will store that energy, because it's energy, sugar, as fat, and it will store it as fat for later use. The problem is if you have chronically high insulin, you cannot use that fat.
So it just sits there.
Yes.
Because even something you said about then if you were storing a lot of fat and you then try to exercise, the body then becomes stressed, and actually it makes it worse, not better.
Yeah. So you release cortisol, and then that in itself creates issues with fat loss, because it's a stress hormone, and when the body's under stress, it tries to hold on to fat because it thinks that it's going to need it for a time when there is famine.
And that was actually mentioned in the Ultra Processed People book, about actually the diet and exercise, as in low fat diet and exercise, actually will not produce weight loss or sustainable weight loss.
No, well, we talked last week about the eat less, move more idea, and how that's completely flawed. You cannot outrun a bad diet. I mean, and so many people will say, oh, I do so much exercise so I can eat what I want, and it's
Really well
exercise is great. You know, doing exercise has many benefits, but actually it doesn't give you carte blanche to just eat ultra processed foods, because eventually, after about 20 years, as we learnt today, eating over 100 grams of sugar over 20 years will lead you to type 2 diabetes. And 100 grams of sugar isn't really a lot.
Not if we've just established that 2 slices of toast is 30 grams, and that's only the first thing you eat.
And then if you had sandwich for lunch, you know, that's another 30. That's not including the filling.
Yeah, or any fruit or snack that you might have with it. Or it's very easy to add up, isn't it?
And if you had like a small innocent
smoothie,
there are other brands, not so innocent, or fruit juice, you know, that can have up to 50 grams in a small serving. So actually 100 grams, although it doesn't sound a lot, or it may sound a lot, it isn't. No, it's easily done.
So within that, the other thing that was interesting is that you said, as you call it, the eat bollocks plate, not the eat well plate.
Are we allowed to say that?
Yeah. That suggests that you should eat 30% of carbs per day. So if you're eating 30% of carbs per day, that's already going to go over your 100 grams of sugar, is it not?
I haven't done the maths, but if your average diet should be 2,000 calories, say, for a woman, well, a third of that is going to be...
like 600, 600.
Yeah. So if that... I don't know, but it's a lot of...
I think it's 676 or something along those lines. But, so that's... that's quite easily done. 670 odd calories.
It's not a lot, is it? I mean,
not really.
No.
You know, when you go to like a restaurant and it's got the calorie count on the menu, most of those meals are at least like 1,000 plus calories. So actually, if you're just having a sandwich for lunch, that's probably going to be like 500 of those calories.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking, but it's not about calories, it's about nutrients, you know. So a lot of these processed foods that we're talking about are empty calories. So they have sugar that we can use as energy, but if we don't use it as energy right away, it will be stored as fat, and then you can't utilize that energy later if your insulin is chronically elevated. So you're just going to store more fat. And the more insulin your body releases, the more your body is told, store fat, store fat. That's what it does. And it prevents, we like this word, it prevents lipolysis.
Yes, so I wrote this down. So lipogenesis versus lipolysis. So talk about that.
So insulin increases lipogenesis. So lipo means fat. Genesis, think of the Bible, means creation. So insulin increases fat creation and it decreases lipolysis. So that's fat degradation or use. So all the time you're eating substances like carbohydrates, refined sugars that increase the amount of insulin that the body releases, the less you are able to use any fat stores, and actually the more body fat your body will produce.
It's a perfect storm for weight gain, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then we moved on to apoptosis, which is cellular die-off.
Yeah.
And then autophagy, which is self-eating.
That's right.
So yeah, look, check me out. I wrote notes.
So apoptosis. Apoptosis is cell death. So all of your cells have like an internal death switch, and they will basically self-destruct after a certain time. And that's important that they do that, because cells that don't self-destruct are cells like cancer cells. They just permanently renew themselves. They don't die. So apoptosis is really important, and that is prevented when you have high insulin. Also, autophagy, which means self-eating, is reduced when you have chronically high insulin levels. So autophagy doesn't sound great, self-eating, but that's where the body recycles cells, proteins, and how it heals itself and reuses any worn out amino acids, polypeptides, proteins and stuff like that. So it's how we recycle. And that also is prevented when you have high insulin levels. So if you think about those two processes, chronically high insulin can lead to a disease that we all know is increasing significantly in the Western world, and any country that actually eats like we do, and that's cancer.
It was, what's interesting is I wrote, we went through a whole list of common diseases and ailments that are significantly increased through carbohydrates and sugars. So obviously cancer being one of them, but there's a whole list here. So I just run through the list of some of them that I noted, and I particularly want to talk about a couple of them, if that's all right. So polycystic ovaries, gallbladder disease, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, strokes, hypertension, cholesterol, cancer, Alzheimer's, inflammatory diseases, autism, osteoporosis were just probably a third of them that I noted down, that what we were looking at. We had a really interesting conversation around autism. Yeah.
I mean, this is a really questionable one, I think, because I don't think that high carbohydrate diets necessarily cause autism. I think that is going a bit too far. However, autism rates have gone up significantly in the last 30 to 50 years. They used to be quite rare. Now they're very, very much more common.
Do you think that's because of diagnosis, or do you think it's because there are more cases?
I think possibly we are better at diagnosing it, but even with that, I think that without doubt there is more increase.
Yeah.
And I just wonder whether the low-fat paradigm over generations has affected babies in utero. So when they're inside their mother, if the mother isn't eating enough good quality fat, and of course the brain and the spinal cord is made essentially of fat and cholesterol. I don't think it's one generation. This is probably since probably about the 1950s. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting that when I treat children with autism, they tend to have a very beige diet, without a doubt. And the children that I have managed to work with to reduce significantly the amount of carbohydrates and beige food and sugar, their symptoms do improve. They tend to be calmer. They tend to be able to cope at school better. They're able to cope in social situations better and not feel as overwhelmed. So I don't think it's a cause necessarily, but I do think it can play a factor for sure.
That's interesting. And funny you should mention that. So we've been discussing about our youngest daughter recently, and she's too young to know, but she does have some tendencies that make us go, maybe. But she is a total beige girl. She only eats beige food. We cannot get anything else into her. And that's really interesting. And I know that her siblings are the same, and that, birth family were the same as well. So that's been really interesting.
Yeah, so I think without a doubt there's nature nurture, isn't there? But I think it's an interesting point. And there's a really good documentary, it's called The Magic Pill. Used to be on Netflix, but I don't think it is now. But there's it's a really good documentary, and they feature a family with a non-verbal severely autistic child, and they put the child on a very low carbohydrate, high fat diet, and it's quite, I mean, she's not cured, I don't think you can cure autism. However, she does go from being completely non-verbal, and at the end of the documentary she actually says mum. It's really emotional. Even thinking about it now makes you think, wow.
I bet the production team were like, this is gold.
It was just, it really, really was amazing to watch. And you can't act this. It was without doubt 100% real.
Yeah, good. So that's a good documentary. There's a book, isn't there, as well, The Magic Pill? Or did I make that up?
I think there is. I think we were talking about that with Katie, but I think The Magic Pill, that book is on, isn't that on that weight loss drug?
Oh, I don't know.
I think
Ozempic.
So. Yeah, I think so.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
Different kind of magic pill.
Yeah. A very expensive magic pill.
Yeah. Are there any other of those diseases there that you want to specifically mention?
Well, I think we should talk a little bit about cardiovascular disease because, we've been led to believe that a high-fat diet, particularly fats from saturated fats, such as animal fats, have led or cause heart disease. And actually that really is not true. If anything, it's the opposite. So it's a high refined sugar, refined flour, refined carbohydrate diet that leads to type 2 diabetes, and the link between type 2 diabetes and heart disease is much, much stronger. But the lipid phobia, the fat phobia movement really sticks. And people really can't get their head around a high fat, low carbohydrate, ketogenic diet. How can that be healthy? But it's true. Your blood pressure hopefully will keep coming down. And blood pressure is a marker of an increased possibility of having a cardiovascular event at later life. This is why everybody over the age of sort of 45, 50 is put on a blood pressure medication. Well, if you can control that through diet, that's an option, that you're probably not told. And not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody wants to change their diet radically. But it would be good if they had a choice.
If they knew the information either way. And if you're educated on either side of that coin, then you can make an informed choice for you in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. So the other thing about my blood, so you talked about my blood pressure going down, but then the other measure, what was it? The
HbA1c.
Yeah. So we're hoping that that's going to come down as well through this.
Well, you won't have another blood test. They test that every 3 months because it's essentially a marker of the life of your red blood cell. So you would only have that done regularly if you were diabetic. So it's probably unlikely that we'll get another result. But
I wonder if we could though. Like, is there a private thing that you can do?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah,
because I've done some home blood tests before where you just kind of do a pinprick and squeeze it in and send it off.
Yeah.
And that makes me go, ugh. But I'm sure I could do it if you did it and I looked away.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had a lady, one of my first patients actually, who was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Her blood pressure was extremely high to the point where I was debating calling an ambulance. It was like 200 over 100 and something. So I actually had to phone her husband to come and get her because I didn't want her to walk home. And her HbA1c was over 100.
Wowzers.
Yeah, so it was extremely high. And within 3 months of a ketogenic diet, it'd gone down from 100 and something to 52.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So significantly. And within that 3 months also, her blood pressure had normalised. It's incredibly, I mean, if this diet was a drug, it would be a blockbuster. The problem is it's not recommended because there is no money in dietary modification.
Doesn't sell drugs.
No.
Doesn't make billionaire pharmaceutical
And
companies
it takes a lot
it?
of time. It takes a lot of time. This is why I do the 6-week course, because there's so much information to really understand, because you will have people say to you, oh, all that fat, you're going to get heart disease. Oh, you're going to have a heart attack. Oh, what about eggs? Don't they give you high cholesterol? There's so much that we need to discuss before you really embark on a ketogenic diet, that you understand why you're doing it.
I wish they taught this in schools. This is so much more useful than Pythagoras' theorem.
But the convention would not agree with me. You know, they still say, the government still advises that 1/3 of your plate should be carbohydrates.
But you regularly work with clients, prescribe this diet and see improvement, correct?
Absolutely.
And
with loads of different things as well, not just diabetes, with mental health. So I'm actually doing a diploma through the Nutrition Network, is where I did all my training, it's called metabolic psychiatry, and it's incredibly interesting how people's mental health improves significantly through eating a diet low in carbohydrates. And really it makes a lot of sense, because sugar is so stimulating to the brain. It can cause overwhelm, anxiety, depression.
You talked about it affecting the neurons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that for me is interesting, because my dad died from motor neuron disease, and there's that book Grain Brain, isn't there, that talks about how grains, or carbs, directly affect your central nervous system. So that for me is just fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating. It really is fascinating. And I mean, they call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. So diabetes of the brain. You know, and when you think that your brain is about 70% fat, and then we've all been eating low fat and the wrong fats, no wonder there's this epidemic in dementia and Alzheimer's. We've literally been told the wrong thing since the sort of late 50s, you know.
Since the expansion of Western medicine, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not to poo-poo Western medicine in its entirety. It has its place.
Oh, yeah. If you get on if you need an operation, or you've broken a bone, or you're in an accident, acute medicine, they're amazing. But long-term chronic illness, dietary advice you know, my job as a herbalist is to teach you not to need medicine. Now, not everybody wants to change their diet, and some people would prefer to have medicine than to change, and that's up to them.
But as you say, I think the important thing is that you are educated on both sides of that coin.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you get to pick and choose.
Yeah.
No one can judge. It's like voting, isn't it? You can't judge anyone for who they vote for as long as they've researched appropriately and they've then made an informed decision that they feel in alignment with. I think it should be the same for health. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Great. All right, well, what we'll do, we'll stop it there, because otherwise we're going to just effectively repeat the whole workshop and then you don't need to sell it. We learnt so much more today, and we've got so much more next week, because next week we're looking at the practical measures that you can take to implement this, right?
Yeah, so we'll be looking at how to embark actually on a ketogenic diet, because I think now most of the people that have attended the class have been wowed by the information and quite shocked by quite a lot of things, and now it's about putting that knowledge into reality and actually looking at embarking on a ketogenic diet and learning how to read labels. Yeah, so it'll be a more practical one next week.
Yeah, we're all going to bring in stuff from our cupboards and we're going to read the labels, which is what we did live a while back, didn't we? It was quite fun.
Yeah.
Terrifyingly fun.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll see you next week.
Same time next week.
Bye.